Hi, today's topic for the lecture is molecular medicine, and I will be talking about the introduction and application of molecular medicine. I'm Swasti Tiwari. I'm working as a professor and head in the Department of Molecular Medicine and Biotechnology at Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, which is a tertiary care hospital in the city Lucknow in India. And I also hold adjunct faculty appointment in Department of Medicine at Georgetown University Medical Center, Washington, D.C. So, following topics I will be covering: definition, objectives of molecular medicine, the three-layered structure which is proposed for molecular medicine, and the most important and essential component of molecular medicine, that is omics technology. Then there are some powerful techniques in the omics technology, and I'll be giving the examples of those techniques. Besides, there are some promising strategies which have already revolutionized clinical practice, emerging concepts, and then some examples how molecular medicine had made an impact in clinical practice. So, in order to understand why this field was needed to begin with, so let's look back at some historical events. In 1965, by James Watson, the central dogma of molecular biology was published, and this was a complete demonstration of the flow of genetic information. Basically describes as DNA makes RNA, which makes protein. So DNA, we know that it is the hereditary material in human. It is deoxyribonucleic acid, and it is a sequence of nucleotides that encodes the synthesis of gene products, which could be RNA or protein. RNA, that is ribonucleic acid, is a polymeric molecule that is assembled as a chain of nucleotide, but unlike DNA, RNA is found in nature as a single strand folded onto itself. Protein, we all know, are polymeric chains of amino acids that are linked together by peptide bonds. Around 20 years later of this central dogma, the single gene and inheritance concept has changed to multiple gene and inheritance. And this extinction of central dogma has led to a new concept called phenome, which is as a total phenotypic characteristic of an organism, so which implies interaction of the whole genome with the environment. And then exactly after 50 years of the invention of DNA structure by Watson and Crick, the Human Genome Project got completed in 2003, and which was a valuable breakthrough. So at that point, there was a need was realized to integrate new research in molecular biology into clinical practice, and which has led to the emergence of molecular medicine. So the definition of molecular medicine, we can describe it as an attempt to understand molecular basis of human health and diseases, and use this knowledge to design specific molecular tools for disease diagnosis, treatment, prognosis, and prevention. So if you look at the primary objectives, the primary objective is to reveal molecules such as genes, transcripts, protein, metabolites, and to underline the mechanism behind the physiological processes, as well as alteration during the pathological condition. So to give some example of specific objectives which we are looking into when we move ahead in the field of molecular medicine, and that is to help in predicting potential future pathologies, to identify disease state through effective screening and early diagnosis system. And another most important objective is to come up with effective treatment strategies with minimum or no side effect. So how that could be achieved? Molecular biology, because of the objectives which I have already mentioned in the earlier slide, it is very clear that we need to have skills of different fields in order to work in molecular medicine to achieve those objectives. So it is an interdisciplinary approach which requires skills of biochemistry, molecular biology, immunology, bioinformatics, medical technology, biotechnology, genetics, and biophysics. So we need to have skills of all these fields in order to go ahead with the designed or assigned objectives of molecular medicine. So it is often suggested that molecular medicine is a three-layered structure. And three layers are clinical medicine, basic medicine, and translational medicine. And none of these layers can be ignored. All these are very much interdependent on each other. So if we are moving ahead with the objectives, which are already discussed in the first slides, then all these three layers have to be taken into account. So by clinical medicine, as the name suggests, it involves patient care or clinical care and collection or studying clinical samples like biofluids, tissues. So we call it as biobanking of the human samples, disease or healthy state. Basic medicine then comes into picture because we use molecular biology technologies and omics technologies to study or to analyze those samples, and at the end novel diagnostic and therapeutics could be developed. So that is the translational medicine. So as I said, omics technology is a very essential part of molecular medicine. So what is omics technology? As omics are derived from the suffix om, so the term om derived from a Greek word meaning whole, all, and complete. So it is very clear from the term itself that it refers to collective and high throughput analysis, including genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, and metabolomics. So this high throughput analysis and then integrated through robust system biology, bioinformatic, and computational tool. And just we need to know why this is important to have this type of high throughput approach, because in contrast to one single gene disease concept of Mendelian inheritance, chronic complex diseases are now realized as a result of alteration in multiple genes and signaling pathway. Furthermore, these diseases are generally characterized with heterogeneity at the cellular and tissue level. Therefore, identification and using omics-based profiling of multiple biomarker profile rather than studying at one single gene or single biomarker possesses greater statistical power and reliability for future screening or for treatment strategies, targets for treatment strategies or diagnosis. So that is why omics technology is of immense importance in this era when complex diseases are known to be a result of alteration in multiple genes. So, and one of the advantage of omics technology is when we do such type of high throughput approach, it is very much unbiased approach rather than focusing on one single thing. So this is just a workflow of how we proceed in the experimental design to achieve a good biomarker or predictive biomarker or target for treatment therapy. So sample collection, which could be biofluids, tissue, or some parameters like imaging parameters and all. So then these samples will be studied at gene level, mRNA level, which is the coding, the mRNA, RNA which codes for the protein, messenger RNA level, at protein level, at metabolites level, or at images level. But as I said, looking single gene, single mRNA, single protein could be a biased approach and may not lead us to the bunch of or the combination of cells or combination of genes and RNA which are responsible for disease. So instead of a single gene, single mRNA approach, the approach which we utilize in molecular medicine in majority of the time is at the level of genome, which is entire set of genes, transcriptome, which is entire set of RNA, or entire set of protein, entire set of metabolites, that is metabolome. So because as you can see, this is a high throughput data, and that needs to be analyzed using a special technique, which is bioinformatic approach, and which is actually have the softwares and all the available features so that we can do a high throughput analysis. So after analysis, we can do modeling and then disease diagnosis or prediction. And as I said in the previous slide as well, that role of bioinformatics is of immense importance, because it not only used to generate curated database from these high throughput data, but it also helps in generation of knowledge base from the manuscripts and curated databases. So for omics technology, bioinformatics is must. Again, as I am using the words genomics, transcriptomics, and proteomics, so just to briefly give you what are these terminologies. So genomics, as I said, is the study of entire set of genes. So Human Genome Project, which was completed in 2003, estimated that humans have around 25,000 genes. Now, every person has 2 copies of each gene, one inherited from each parent. So most genes are same in all people, but some or a small percentage, 1 to 2%, or a small number of genes, less than basically 1% of the total, are slightly different between people. And that's why when we study these genes and the interaction with the environments, we are basically studying genomic medicine. So which is the field to study or look into the genes and their interaction with our health. And as opposed to conventional genetics, which scrutinizes the functioning and composition of single gene, genomics addresses all genes and their interrelationship in order to identify their combined influence on growth and development. So remember, multiple genes are the cause of complex diseases. So we need to understand that all genes need to be taken into account, at least when we are studying for a particular disease, or how it influenced the growth and development of our organisms. Now, genomics had immensely facilitated the field personalized medicine, and I'll be describing this term later on also in the slide. And because personalized medicine, how it has helped in personalized medicine is through investigating the complex biological details of the individual for effective diagnosis and tailor-made treatment. So this is genomics. About transcriptome, which is, again, as I said, is the study of entire set of mRNA, that is protein coding RNA. Now, 2 biological techniques are used to study transcriptome, so commonly used, and that is DNA microarray, which is a hybridization based technique, and RNA sequencing, which is a sequence based approach. So I will be discussing in detail about these 2 techniques in the coming slides. And the data obtained from this transcriptome is very useful in research to gain insight into the processes such as cellular differentiation, carcinogenesis, transcription regulation, and biomarker discovery. Proteomics is more complicated than genomics. So the third terminology, that is entire set of protein, that is what we study in proteomics, is more complicated. And why is that? Because genome actually is more or less constant in an organism, whereas proteome differ from cell to cell and also with time. So distinct genes are expressed in different cell types. So earlier the idea was like, when we have to get the idea about the set of protein expressed, we usually do check or assess the things at RNA or mRNA level. But later on, more and more studies have shown, and now it is well realized, or it is already realized, that there is a lack of correlation between the mRNA and protein content. So it is because mRNA is not always translated into protein, and the amount of protein produced for a given amount of mRNA depends upon the gene it is transcribed from, and also the condition. So that is why mRNA data most of the time doesn't correlate with the protein data. from the same experimental model. And this makes the study of proteomics separate study of the proteomic study important. Now, as I said, the two most powerful technologies or techniques under omics technologies are microarray and next generation sequencing. Microarray is a hybridization based technique. So here microarray can be done to study DNA, mRNA and protein at protein expression or functional assays. So array tools were developed about 25 years ago with the implementation of DNA microarray technology. It is a very accurate platform intended to determine mRNA expression for the simultaneously determination of thousands of genes, because you can do in one go, so it's high throughput. But soon the necessity of DNA microarray to evolve towards protein microarray become obvious, as mRNA, as I said, that mRNA profile were not perfectly matching with the protein expression. So now microarrays are available for DNA, mRNA and protein analysis. Next generation sequencing is a sequencing based approach, and it is an advanced technique now because the massive parallel sequencing technology, which is also it is called, has revolutionized the biological sciences, because with its ultra high throughput scalability and speed with NGS you can sequence many sequences in one time in a very less time and at less low cost. So NGS is basically, researchers are doing NGS for various reasons, like they want to know the sequence of whole genome, you can do that, and if you have to look deeply into the sequence target region, or you need to utilize RNA sequencing to discover novel RNA variants, splice sites, or qualify mRNA for gene expression analysis as well. You can also do epigenetic factors such as genome-wide DNA methylation, DNA protein interaction, and sequence cancer samples to study rare mutation or rare somatic variants or tumor subclones and more. And these days it is very common in use also, and because you can study microbial diversity in human or in the environment. So basically this is a sequencing based approach, and I will be discussing the overview of its workflow. So first, microarray. As I said, you can use this to measure the expression of large number of genes simultaneously or to genotype multiple regions of a genome. It is a collection of microscopic DNA spots attached to a solid surface. So basically it is a chip based method. So on the chip you have DNA spots. So basically those spots we call probes. They can be a single-stranded DNA or protein probes which are immobilized on solid surface, and that surface could be chip or a slide. And broadly they are, as I mentioned in the earlier slides, they can be classified into the type of samples or the type of molecule you will be studying. So it's DNA, RNA or protein. So DNA microarray. DNA microarray is an approach to identify DNA having mutated genes. So this is one of the applications for which you can use DNA microarray. And probes, they are of known identity, so they are immobilized on silicon chips or nylon membrane, and comparative genomic hybridization is used to analyze the entire genome for DNA content, different by comparing on experimental samples. So this is just to give you a schematic diagram how the microarray works, and this is an example of RNA microarray. So basically total RNA is extracted or isolated from the sample, then it has to be reverse transcribed to cDNA or complementary DNA, and after in vitro transcription these are converted into cRNA, which are then fragmented and labeled. So this is biotin labeled cRNA. Now these cRNA, labeled cRNA, are then hybridized on the chips I was discussing in the earlier slide. So this is how the chip look like, and on this glass chip, it contains about 54,000 probe set, and each probe set is about each probe set means 12 to 20 probes for a particular gene. So this gives you more confidence. It's not just one probe and one gene. There are multiple probes for the same gene, and you can analyze your data, or you can get the data with better confidence. And the probe size is about 25 base pair. So when you get your samples labeled with biotin, you hybridize it with this on this chip, and then after washing, you scan the chip and analyze the data using bioinformatic tools. So this is one of the example how you can represent your data through heat map, which is basically generated to get the differential expression of the genes. So for example, if you see these color codes, red, blue, purple, and green, they could be different, 4 different groups or 4 different conditions depending upon the experiment. And you can see that each column here represent one sample. So there are 3 samples in each group or each condition, and the differential expression can be make out by with the colors which are over here. For example, the green color and red color. So generally, green color tells you that the gene is downregulated, and the red thing shows that it is upregulated. So if you can see certain patches where the adjacent group have green pattern more than red pattern, so the genes in that which is were down regulated as compared to the adjacent group which has red region, or the red more redness. So basically this is how you can just visualize that how the differential pattern of the genes are there. Second is the protein microarray. So protein microarray, as the name suggests, utilizes protein chip. It is a high throughput method used to track the interaction and activities of the protein, and to determine their functions, and determining the function at a large scale. So currently they are classified into 2: functional and analytical protein microarray. So first I'll tell you what is analytical protein microarray. It's mostly antibody microarray, and it has become one of the most powerful multiplex detection technologies. So functional protein microarray being increasingly applied to many areas of biological discoveries, including studies of protein-protein interaction, biochemical activity, immune response. And functional protein microarray have recently been applied to many aspects of discovery-based biology, including protein-protein or protein-lipid protein DNA interactions. So if you just classify them, what are the advantages, or how this information can be applied. So there are various fields like in diagnostics, in proteomics, in protein function analysis, and antibody characterization, and also treatment of the development. So these are the areas where you can utilize the your results from protein microarray, and that can be used. So these are various applications, and as you can see in this diagram, it illustrates you some of those functional arrays which are available. And this I have listed here some of the microarray available based on the analyte, whether it is DNA, protein, or what. And then a tissue microarray is also available. So application, the general application is gene expression profiling, single nucleotide polymorphism detection, and assessment of genome content. Loss of heterozygosity could be assessed, and you can identify novel genes and identify copy number. So depending upon the application and the analyte in your sample which you like to analyze, you can use the microarray or the chips. So this is about the microarray. The second is the next generation sequencing, which I said is a sequencing based approach. And you can get the sequence, these nucleotide sequence, after sequencing your in your samples, DNA or RNA in your samples. So so this is the overview how next generation sequencing works. So there are 3 major steps in next generation sequencing. First is the library preparation, clonal amplification, and then finally sequencing. So the sample preparation steps involve certain steps, and clonal amplification can be of various type like emulsion PCR or bridge amplification. And then you get sequence in FASTA-Q, you get sequence and then it is converted into FASTA-Q files. So step 1 is very important just to understand that library preparation is the first step which we do. So in case of genomic DNA, you prepare DNA library where there is a fragmentation of DNA, or if you are doing targeted, you can do PCR and amplify the region of interest which you want to sequence. So these amplicons or fragmented DNA are then ligated with adapters by PCR. So this is adapter ligation, and that is how your sequencing library is prepared. So in the case of RNA, you have to first convert into complementary DNA by RT-PCR, or you can do the adapter ligation first and then convert it into cDNA, or by RT-PCR you can convert them into the cDNA. And here where you have done the RT-PCR for cDNA, the cDNA can be again by ligation. The adapters can be ligated by PCR, and you generate sequencing libraries. So these sequencing libraries after clonal amplification are then sequenced by next generation sequencing, and these NGS output data are then output in the FASTA-Q files. So you get these reads, this sequence in the which you call the NGS reads. Now this is the analysis part where you need to align these sequence read against the reference genome. And if the reference genome is not available, then de novo assembly of NGS reads without reference genome is done. So this is again the very like a bioinformatic approach is required at this point because there's a huge amount of data that you need to analyze. So this is just in very brief. I'm not going into too much technical detail. So there are types of sequencing depending upon so I will explain one by one. So sequence by synthesis is actually in very much commonly used. So it utilizes the step-by-step incorporation of reversibility fluorescent and terminated nucleotide for DNA sequencing. Another sequencing approach is pyrosequencing, in which the sequence reaction is monitored through the release of pyrophosphate during nucleotide incorporation. And here light is emitted. So basically the signal comes in the form of light. Sequencing by ligation make uses of DNA ligase enzyme and a mixture of different fluorescently labeled dinucleotide probes. So mismatch sensitivity of DNA ligase is used as inherent tool to identify target sequence. And now there is another, the ion semiconductor sequencing, which utilizes the release of hydrogen ions during the sequencing reaction to detect the sequence. So depending upon the method of sequencing, there are different types of sequencing approach available. So and there are various companies now in various platforms available from Illumina, from IronTorrent. So I have just listed some of them. So the core principle of Illumina NGS is that it is based on sequence by synthesis, and that I have already explained in the previous slide. Then now there is an Oxford Nanopore. So nanopore is a nanoscale hole, and in this device an ionic current through nanopores are passed, and that measure the changes in current as biological molecule passes through the nanopore or near it. So basically this technology is also there in the IronTorrent technology, because it also adopts an electrochemical gradient system called ion sensitivity field, which can detect ions as they release by DNA polymerase during sequence by DNA synthesis. So these are some of the platforms I have mentioned, but there are more which you can check. There are more available. Now, application of NGS, I have already described in the earlier slide for researchers what are the applications available. But here I like to specifically highlight that what is its application in clinical practice. So it helps in diagnosis of genetic diseases and identify future disease risk, predict responses to drug at increasingly lower cost. So it also elucidates more complex genetic basis of many multi-gene major disabling and fatal diseases. So that is why it is gaining more and more importance now in clinical practice. And the other application, as I said, is transcriptome analysis, discovering non-coding RNA, because these are not the protein coding RNA like a microRNA. These are not the protein coding RNA, but they have a major role in gene regulation. Then NGS is also very helpful in mutation analysis, DNA protein interaction, and sequencing clinical isolates. Now, the next topic is the emerging concepts in omics. And as I said, there are few terminologies which are frequently used in molecular medicine, and which is based on the omics technology. So first of them is exposomes, exposomics, and as I said, gene environment interaction is very crucial now. So the study of environmental exposure to unravel the role of environment in human diseases is what we call exposomes. So basically it is a person's total lifestyle and environmental exposure. Biobanking is a word which is commonly used, and the importance I've already explained in the earlier slide. But the one important thing is that why we need large, because biobanking means we are collecting large set of human samples, and it is because accurate determination and validation of disease related biomarkers necessitate the development of biorepository with a large collection and storage of patient bias. So it gives you more statistical power, more confidence when you validate your diagnostic or diagnostic molecule or thing. So it means you actually have greater confidence when you validate in large sample size. And now biobanking actually the need for not only biobanking from the diseased population, but also from healthy human has been highlighted. And why it is? Because we need to know what are the normal. So basically, once we know the normal expression or the normal expression of certain genes, so normal range is known, then it is easy to identify what is the deviation from the normal or what is abnormal. So that is why most of the research organizations are focusing towards biobanking from healthy humans as well. Then comes single cell omic analysis, and as the name suggests, it is the high throughput analysis for single cell DNA content, RNA content, or protein content. It is useful for precise enrichment of biomarker which otherwise would be obscure due to genomic diversity and molecular heterogeneity of the complex diseases. Now, single cell, for example, single cell RNA-seq techniques. So as I mentioned, the flow for NGS, it is more or less similar for single cell, that it converts the population of RNA in a single cell to a library of cDNA fragments, and that fragments are then sequenced by high throughput next generation sequencing. So there are other terminologies. Preventive medicine, as the name suggests, is a branch of molecular medicine, which allows for the prediction of future disorder changes and disease outcome. Personalized medicine, in the first slide I have already discussed that how genomic medicine is helping personalized medicine, because it is a way to improve the clinical care by accounting the patient's specific data, and it is at the level of individual, not whereas public health investigation is at the population level. Pharmacogenomics is very useful because it analyzes that how the genetic makeup of an organism of an individual affects his or her response to a drug. And again, by high throughput technologies, we'll come to know that what are the differences in the genetic makeup which may have made the individual responded differently towards a drug. Then other strategies are there which have revolutionized clinical practice, and some of them are genome editing, liquid biopsy, nanomedicine, and gene therapy. So genomic gene editing, which is basically CRISPR-Cas9, is a very promising gene editing technique where you can cut the DNA strand in the place to which it was guided. And here there is a guide RNA which guide the enzyme to the site of the genomic DNA or the DNA where the editing has to be done. So basically it is a very powerful technique, and it allows engineering of any type of mutation to be created or corrected in virtually any cell or organisms, and it facilitates a genetic or genomic analysis of patient samples to study inherited disease. Liquid biopsies, because biopsy, as we know, is an invasive procedure, has various limitations and side effects of its own. So now there are circulating tumor cells, cell-free DNA, or exosomes which are present in the circulations, which can serve as a source for these tissue biomarkers. So because this is a non-invasive approach or minimally invasive approach, it is very much popular among the scientists and the clinicians who are working towards the diagnostic monitoring or therapeutic approaches. And this is just one example from our lab where we are using urinary exosomes for renal disease diagnostics. And this is just the characterization data I have shown from the urine samples using electron microscopy, using DLS and some specific marker of the exosomes, that these are like nano vesicles which we have isolated from urine samples. And also later on the omics technology have been used to monitor or to analyze the RNA and RNA content using NGS and microarray. So another important strategy is the use of nanotechnology and in various medical applications. So nanotechnology, as the name suggests, is the study of molecules or particles which are the size below 100 nanometers. And some of the disciplines in medicine or diagnostics where these are already in use are given in this table, like cancer. These nanoparticles have been used to destroy cancer cells. Tissue engineering, they serve as a good scaffold to drive tissue growth and differentiation. And similarly, for surgery also, it's used for welding of tissues using nanoparticle substance. And in diagnostics, there are nanoparticle based imaging agents. So also these nanoparticles are used as a drug delivery vehicle, and we call this as nanopharmaceuticals. So where these nanoparticles are used for carrying the drugs are loaded in them. So these are basically, most of them are synthetically produced and some of them are naturally occurring. As you can see, the various kinds of nanoparticles listed here, like liposomes, polymeric nanoparticles, dendrimers, and exosomes, which are naturally occurring, nanogels, and gold nanoparticles. Besides being a nanocarrier, they have therapeutic property in themselves. So they are used as therapeutic drugs as well. So like nanocrystals, nanoprecipitates, nanosuspensions, and nanogels. So these are some of the therapeutic applications of nanocarriers. So they are now used for ocular and pulmonary drug delivery. They are used for the delivery of anti-cancer agents and for neurodegenerative diseases, antifungal agents, and most of the imaging agents which are in use are nanoparticle based. Besides, liposomes are it's a excellent drug delivery tool because it has a better penetration power than nanocarriers. Gene therapy, I think most of us are already aware of this term, where the therapeutic genes are used to directly deliver into the cells. So the cells can be somatic cells, so they are not able to inherit in the future generation, and that is why this is the common in at least in the research arena. So gene can be introduced into the germline cells, and germline cells, because in that case they are able to inherit in the future generation, and that is why it is not attempted due to ethical and technical reasons. Besides, in vivo gene therapy is the direct transfer of genes to the cells or tissue, and ex vivo gene therapy where the transfer of the gene first to the cultured cells and then reinsertion. And this is being used when there's non-sufficient gene production in vivo. So there are various advantages of gene therapy because you can basically eradicate the disease from future generation. But the disadvantage is that multiple gene defects cannot be treated with gene therapy, and also the effect is short-lived. So with these promising strategies, I'd like to end my talk here, and again like to re-emphasize that molecular medicine emerged to integrate new research into clinical practice, and with the advancement in technique and especially the omic technology in molecular medicine has enabled us to quickly move on to preclinical studies and translate the research advancement into novel therapeutic and diagnostic application. And of course, bioinformatics has a major role to play in molecular medicine. So this is the Department of Molecular Medicine at SGPGI, and these are the people in the department, and this is our website if somebody likes to visit. With that, thank you for listening.